Welcome to Truthwave Media. I'm Jenny. Today, I'm very honored to have Mr. Sergio to join us. And he was the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Western Hemisphere Affairs. And he's also a former candidate for Governor of Virginia. Today, we have an honor to invite him to give us a briefing about borders because he went there last week to Texas. So, Mr. Sergio, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jenny.
Why did you go to the border last week?
I wanted to get an assessment of what's going on. I believe that the best way to understand the nature of a problem is to go physically see what the problem is, unlike our vice president. I went to the border.
We will give the time to you to give us the briefing with some of the slides that you have. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Jenny. So as I indicated, I went to the border because I wanted to get an assessment of what the situation is as far as the flows of illegal immigrants coming into the United States. And I'm one of those that fully supports and understands that this country was founded on immigration, because the uniqueness of the United States is that out of all of the disparate people that make up this country, we become one through assimilation. And that's based on the foundational documents of this country, the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. And what it does is, because you assimilate and out of many you become one, you have the opportunity to put yourself in a situation where you can take advantage of what you bring to this country through your hard work. It provides you opportunity. Opportunity is the key theme. So that's the uniqueness of the United States. And as I pointed out in my campaign, the United States is the cradle of the American experiment that has created the greatest good and opportunity for the world in the history of humanity. And so it's got to be based on a national identity, and that national identity is to be an American. And you can look like anybody and come from any part of the world, and within one generation, we become American, such as you and such as me. We've become American. We've gone through the assimilation process because we believe in these fundamental principles. But it's got to be immigration that's legal and controlled. Illegal immigration weakens the United States from the inside. And coincidentally, if you look at what's happening in the United States today, you can tie all these flows of countless immigrants coming in without any type of screening to other things that are happening in the United States, such as our electoral integrity process, the weakening of the First Amendment through excessive censorship and attacks on the church. You also see what's happening with the Second Amendment. You see what's happening with the indoctrination in our schools. You see how our economy is being weakened by constantly manipulating it so that it becomes next to impossible for a young person to be able to obtain enough resources to be able to buy a home, which is the biggest private property thing that you own. And so when you look at all of these things happening at the same time, you wonder if this is by coincidence or by design. So that's just something to think about when you start looking at the immigration problem within the context of a bigger whole. I would argue that there are many things that are occurring to weaken the United States from the inside, but that's a topic of discussion for another time. So let's just talk about this trip that I made to the border in Texas. The border is wide open. I'm going to show you some slides here in a minute so that I can highlight some of these. The people of Texas feel very insecure. They feel the government is not doing enough to protect them, and this is the challenge that they face. So let me just give you I just want to cover a few slides here. This is a briefing that the Del Rio Sheriff gave us. So this is, as I mentioned previously, Del Rio's in Val Verde County in Texas. I'll show you here some of the crossing checkpoints. This is between Del Rio and Ciudad Acuña, Coahuila, which is the partner city across the river. As you can see there, you've got these vehicles that come here. Let me see if I can show you a little bit of video. So you can see the vehicle up here just parks. People walk down and they walk across. Now, sometimes that river can be a little treacherous and people fall and they drown. So just to give you an example, here's what happened where people thought they could get across, and I believe I've got a better pictorial to indicate what happened here. This is a Customs and Border Patrol launch that is coming out to rescue these people that are surrounded, or they're on a little bit of it's like a little island. It's a grassy area that's elevated because the water current is getting pretty treacherous. So these people were afraid to go any further. So they got stuck there. So these people had to go get them. I asked the sheriff if there was any requirement to pick them up. I said, is there a dividing line like the middle of the river where they're on the Mexico side on one side and the U.S. on the other? He says, yes, there is. But once you're in the water, the U.S. treats it as if it's on U.S. property. So they'll go out there and rescue them. So they had to go out and rescue these people that were stuck there and potentially could have drowned. So here you can see this airboat coming out to rescue them. And so these are things that occur often. So anyway, you get the idea. So here's some of the people that are coming across. Notice that they're very COVID conscious. They all wear their little masks. So I guess they've been programmed correctly for it. They're wearing masks outside, so that's interesting. So this happens on a daily basis. Here's another group of people crossing. More people crossing. These are the people that were stuck there. That gives you a better picture of what happens. They come across and they run into problems, and then they have to go. Somebody has to go rescue them. So oftentimes these people get stuck without water, and so the sheriff's department has to go out there and give them a helping hand. There's some people that are crossing in the middle of the night, young children. And so you get the general idea. Now, this is a group of Venezuelans. If you notice, a lot of these people don't look like they've been traipsing through the desert, because often they haven't. In many cases, these people have money and they're just coming in, and we don't know who they are. But here's another group of people coming across. There's an even bigger group. And as you can see, the numbers are growing. Lots of Haitians coming in. Last week, there were over 1,000. And so there's some more folks. I mentioned a staging area where the buses go and pick them up. This is one of those staging areas. And this is where they're being given instructions on where to line up. More. Anyway, you can see that right now, these people are turning themselves in. They're not putting up a struggle. They're not complaining. They're not, well, I don't know if they're complaining, but they're not putting up any type of struggle. They're just coming across. One of the challenges that you face is that there's a lot of coyotes that are also moving people into the United States. And when they're found, the Texas public safety folks go after them, so they chase them, and there's a lot of chases, and what happens at times is these guys are very careless because they're trying to avoid the police, and they'll go in and out of traffic, and oftentimes what happens is this. In this case, 9 immigrants were killed. Here's a little bit of an example. This is a different case. This was a father and a daughter that were going to a lake, the Amistad Lake, which is right there outside of Del Rio, and one of the coyotes ran into their vehicle, the little girl, and had her leg shredded, and they had to medevac her out of here. Both of them survived, but they're going to be having a long recovery, and whether this little girl is going to be able to regain her ability to walk or not is unknown at this point. So these things have some significant tragedies involved. I'm not going to go into the drownings, because what you're going to see there are pictures of people laying on the side of the river that have drowned. I did want to show you, no, I think that's it, because the other ones are just the drownings. So this gives you an idea of what we're dealing with. And it's not a very pleasant situation, but that gives you a general appreciation for what's going on across the board. Some of these. Now, what's happened is that now we're allowing family units to come into the United States with very little scrutiny. And by a family unit, it's defined as one adult and one child. So that's a pretty liberal definition of a family unit, because is there a way that you can really verify that that child that you're carrying with you is your own? I would argue that the case is there's too many coming in to be able to make that a clear verification. And if you look at the number of people that are coming in, as long as you're a family unit, you're going to be allowed in. So year to date, in this particular county, which is Val Verde, which encompasses Del Rio, Texas, we have 70 different nationalities, or 70, the immigrants that have come through come from 70 different countries. If you're from Venezuela, if you're from Cuba, and you're from Haiti, you comprise the largest number in recent crossings. And that number just keeps growing. What's going to make this even more challenging is, as of the 21st of June, it is likely that anytime thereafter, that what's called Title 42 will no longer be a factor. Title 42 is what allows us to keep certain people out due to medical considerations due to COVID, which means that right now, if you have COVID or because of COVID, you're more restrictive on who can come in. But those restrictions will be lifted sometime here in the near future, probably this month. So you can expect even more people coming in. So the Customs and Border Protection Agency, the CBP, is overwhelmed. Just to give you an idea, in January, they were seeing 25 immigrant crossings per week. Today, or as of 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago when I was there, it was up to 500 per day. So that varies somewhat between 300 to 500, and the numbers are variable. And so if you want to look at how do you draw comparisons, when President Trump put into effect the stay in Mexico policy, immigration dropped by 80%. When President Biden opened up immigration, that number increased by 300%. So you can see that more and more people are coming in. And what you're seeing is that brings with it a lot of other problems. For example, last year in 2020, there were 3 drownings in the Del Rio area the entire year. Year to date, there has been 9 drownings. It's a treacherous crossing, and if you get caught in the wrong spot, you can very easily drown. So that's just the human cost of this whole thing. What we heard from the sheriff that gave this briefing is that the people that are showing up and reporting in to these processing centers are only 20 to 30% of those that are coming across. Now, these are statistics based on the area that we were at. So what that means that there's 70 to 80% of illegal crossers are going around the CBP, and the CBP is so busy processing those that turn themselves in that they don't have time to go out after many of these others that are getting across. That doesn't mean that they've completely abandoned their functions to intercept people that are coming across. What that means is that they're just so tied up doing the processing of those that do turn themselves in that they're not able to go after many of these people. Now, in addition to illegal immigrants, there's also a lot of illegal drugs that are coming across. And so my concern from a defense perspective, which is what I used to track, is that we were always very concerned about special interest aliens, which means that those are people that could be coming to this country to cause us harm, such as terrorists, such as people that can insert themselves into stirring up crowds. One of those concerns that I have is that if you follow the pattern, or if you follow the path of the more recent immigrants, such as those that are coming in from Venezuela and other parts of South America, is that now they can fly directly into Mexico. The entry point that I heard most was Cancun, which means that if you are a Venezuelan and you want to come into the United States, you leave from Caracas, which means that you're leaving at least with the knowledge of the Venezuelan government, and you're ending up in Mexico and Cancun. So you no longer have to take that long trek by land, which used to be, if you were coming up from Latin America, is you would have to go to places such as Ecuador, and then you would have to walk or take a bus and get through Panama and get through all of Central America into Mexico, and then finally into the United States. So that path is now narrowed so that if you have the money for a plane ticket, you can just fly into Mexico, take a bus from there to a place like Monterrey, which gets you close to the border, and then from there on up to the border. That has been the route that most of these people describe as them taking. One of the fascinating things about the Venezuelan immigrants is that they are more demanding of their status once they cross into the United States. It's almost as it's a right for them. The Cubans are also under the same belief, and that could be tied to, in the case of the Venezuelans, they have temporary protected status, TPS. The Haitians are in the same boat. And so you're getting more and more Haitians, more and more Venezuelans, because it's the way that the coyotes, the human traffickers, describe their status is that you can just go to the United States and they're going to accept you and they're going to give you the documentation. And in fact, in some cases, that's exactly what's happening, because what happens is once they get across the border, the way the process works is a coyote will take you across the river. They'll tell you go across, go to a staging area. They'll indicate where that staging area is, and they tell them, just wait there. In the mornings, buses will come and get you. And if you don't get the morning buses, the afternoon buses will come and get you. So people will go and stage. The CBP, the Customs and Border Protection folks, will show up with their buses. They'll put people into the buses. They drive them over to a processing center, and then they quickly register them and say, okay, you need to report back to a court hearing to determine if you are eligible for asylum status. Otherwise, you go about your merry way. So once they've been processed, then they go to a non-governmental organization that helps them with phone banks, and then they in turn get money wired to them. And then from there, or if they have money, they just leave from there. And this NGO will ensure that they make it to either air or ground transportation. In the case of the air transportation, they go to the airport, and from there they go off in their merry way, most likely to either Dallas or San Antonio. If you're going by ground, you go to a Stripes gas station, which is, it's kind of like a 7-Eleven. It's a chain of gas stations. And those gas stations are affiliated with the Greyhound bus lines. They show up twice a day. They jump on the bus and off they go to San Antonio or places throughout the United States. Now they're, at that point, they're headed into a theater near you, meaning probably here in, you're getting plenty of those people here in Northern Virginia. So that's the way the process works. Now, the problem is that you're generating all sorts of other illicit activities. In the case of Mexico, you're creating these pipelines, these transportation routes where the immigrants are coming in and taking advantage of U.S. generosity. What that means is that the narco traffickers or the human traffickers are making a lot of money. At the beginning of the year, they were making somewhere in the vicinity of $11 million per week in the Del Rio sector or the Del Rio area. And now they're making somewhere in the vicinity of $25 million per week. So that's the kind of money that's being generated on top of all the drug trafficking money that they're making, which means that those organizations are getting more powerful, and they're going to be something to reckon with. So the challenge that we face is that it just keeps growing and growing and growing. Just to give you a couple of stories, I spoke with an Argentine gentleman who told me how he got here. And I said, do tell me your story. He said, well, I was in the US. I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to need dialysis. So I went down to Argentina to die or to get treatment. He says, and I got treatment and I got better, so I'm back. I said, well, how'd you get back? He says, well, I took a plane from Buenos Aires to Cancun, Mexico. And then from there, I took a bus. I went to 3 different border crossing cities or border cities where I thought I could get across and I couldn't get across. They finally told me, go to Del Rio and you can get across. And sure enough, found a coyote, came across, and this gentleman was obese. He was barely walking on a cane. And then he showed me in his upper left-hand chest, he had pipes sticking out of his body where he had the dialysis machine plug in. He had his medical records and he says, I'm coming to the US to die in the country of my preference, the US. And so what that means is in the process, I'm sure if he needs medical care, he can go to any hospital and then the emergency room must treat him. So they've figured that out. So if you're sick, if you've got problems, you just show up in the US is gonna take care of you. So that's the story of one immigrant. Let me tell you a story about a Texas resident who has to put up with all this. This lady was born in Mexico and she's been in the United States for decades. And she was talking about how it's very difficult to live where she does because the road right in front of her house has caravans of illegal immigrants walking through. And sometimes they want to jump the fence and get things from her. And so she's put in 3 very big dogs. I wouldn't want to jump over that fence. But she says that they're constantly on the lookout because these people are constantly trespassing on their property. And break-ins are not uncommon. Now, when Kamala Harris said that, you know, don't come. One thing is to say don't come. Another thing is to say we're gonna send you back into Mexico if you do come, or we're gonna build a wall so that you can't continue to come across, at least in this particular sector. So the bottom line is that the border is open. It's a national security concern. It's a safety concern. And they're crossing through Texas, but they're coming to places throughout the United States. And our ability to assimilate them is going to be very difficult because they have no status. And even the people that are in TPS, if you look at what happened with the recent ruling from the Supreme Court that said, okay, you were on a TPS status. That's not going to get you a ticket to a green card. So you're always going to be in this limbo where you can live in the United States, but you're not going to have status. So what kind of stability are you going to have? And if you look at the people that are going around these processing centers, we don't know who it is that's coming. So you have gang members, you have criminals, you have potential terrorists. All of this is happening to our country. And so a week ago, Governor Abbott from Texas said, I'm going to do something about it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay aside $1 billion and I'm going to start arresting people. That was it was an 8-point plan, but one of the points that most struck me was he was talking about potentially arresting people. That's not going to work real well because there's not enough jail space in Texas to be able to absorb the number of people coming in. So this is what we're facing. These are the problems that we have. That's my assessment on the border. I think that we need to work with our Texas partners and make people aware of what we're dealing with and the human costs of all of this, because now we inserted ourselves as a link in the chain of human trafficking. A lot of these people that can't pay are indentured servants. So they come to the United States, they continue to work, they continue to pay the cost of them crossing the border. And they're indebted to human traffickers, which makes them more powerful and makes Mexico less stable. And there's all sorts of other second and third order effects that are horrible, which is the reason that we all need to say enough, shut the border down, reinstate the stay in Mexico policy, because we cannot continue to live under these circumstances. So that's my presentation, and I hope it can be a benefit to those of you that watch it.
Thank you so much, Sergio. That's very helpful. It's a vivid picture of what's in the front line and what's going on in our borders. And I hope this will help raise more concerns and raise more attention to this issue to help to build our country better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.